The conference room was buzzing, voices ricocheting off the glass walls, the hum of conversation weaving around me as I tried to focus on the spreadsheet glowing on my laptop. My phone vibrated on the table, the screen lighting up with a name that made my stomach clench. Tyler. I excused myself with a practiced smile, slipping into the sterile hallway, expecting the usual check-in. How's the trip? When are you coming home? The kind of calls that had become routine, almost obligatory in the last few months. But when I answered, his voice sliced through the noise, cold and a little too triumphant. I'm divorcing you, he said, not even bothering with hello. I've already sold the apartment, so you'll have to find somewhere else to live. Enjoy. The words hit me like a slap, echoing in the empty corridor. For a heartbeat, I just stood there, paralyzed, the conference room's energy fading behind me. It wasn't the divorce, it was the way he said it. He sounded proud, like he'd just unveiled a masterpiece, thrilled to have outsmarted me. My fingers tightened around the phone, knuckles whitening. You sold the apartment. I forced my voice to stay steady, refusing to let him hear how hard my heart was racing. Yeah, he replied, and then, God, he actually laughed. Nicole and I need the money to start our life together. She deserves better than a shoebox like that anyway. Nicole, course. The name landed like a punch to the gut, even though I'd suspected for months. The late nights, the vague explanations, the way he'd started to recoil when I reached for his hand. But hearing her name spoken out loud, so casually, as if I was just a footnote in their story, it was like he was erasing me in real time. What surprised me most was the heat that flared in my chest, not tears. Anger. Something electric and alive, burning away the shock. Sounds good, I said coolly, forcing a neutrality that felt almost foreign. I wouldn't let him savor my pain. Not for a second. Let me back up. I'm Amelia. Until that moment, I'd built my life around the idea of partnership, of shared dreams. Tyler and I had 6 years behind us. Years I thought were built on trust, compromise, and the messy, beautiful work of building a home together. That apartment wasn't just a place to sleep. It was the first real thing we'd built as a couple. Every piece of furniture, every paint color, every late-night conversation over takeout, it was all woven into the fabric of my life. I thought it meant something to both of us. But as I stood in that hallway, cataloging the ways he had blindsided me, I realized I'd been fooling myself. Tyler had always been skilled at dodging hard conversations. About money, the future, even things as trivial as whose turn it was to do the dishes. He'd smooth over my concerns with a quick joke, a kiss on the temple, and I'd let myself believe it was enough. I'd mistaken his charm for honesty, his confidence for reliability. The truth was harsher. He was just good at covering his tracks. The rest of the day passed in a daze. I returned to the conference, sitting through strategy sessions and marketing pitches, nodding at the right moments while my mind spun. Tyler was so sure he'd gotten away with it. A clean break, a new life, our shared history erased with a single phone call. He thought he could sell the place I'd poured myself into and walk away, leaving me scrambling for scraps. But there was one critical detail he'd overlooked. The deed. It was in my name. Months ago, during a refinance, the paperwork had shifted everything over to me. Tyler had signed without reading, more interested in the lowered payments than the details. His carelessness, his arrogance, was about to be his downfall. By the time I returned to my hotel that night, the fog of shock had burned off, replaced by a kind of ruthless clarity. I wasn't going to cry, and I certainly wasn't going to beg. If Tyler wanted a fight, I'd give him one, and this time I wouldn't be the one left picking up the pieces. The first person I called was Chloe, my lawyer and, more importantly, my oldest friend. I laid out the story methodically, forcing myself to be calm even as my hands shook. He sold the apartment. Chloe's outrage was instant, her voice rising in disbelief. Does he have any clue he can't do that without your signature? Apparently not, I replied, a hint of grim satisfaction creeping in. He's already making plans with Nicole. In his head, it's a done deal. Chloe let out a low, incredulous laugh. He's in for a nasty surprise. The sale's invalid. You're the sole owner. If he's taken money from the buyer, that's fraud. Real, prosecutable fraud. The word fraud sent an icy thrill through me. Suddenly I could see the path forward. What do we do now? First, we notify the buyer. The sale can't go through. Then I'll send Tyler a formal letter, laying out exactly how much trouble he's in if he tries anything else. And if he pushes, we take him to court. You're holding all the cards, Amelia. I hung up, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me for the first time all day. Tyler had thought he'd trapped me, left me desperate, reeling. But in his haste to erase me from his life, he'd handed me every advantage. For once, I wasn't the one playing catch-up. The next few days I poured myself into work, hitting deadlines and making small talk, all while quietly plotting my next move. The betrayal still stung, but beneath it I found something I hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. For so long I'd been drifting, trying to patch up our relationship, making excuses for Tyler's distance. Now I had a mission. I could almost feel myself growing stronger with every step I took toward reclaiming my life. By the time my trip ended, I was ready, not just to confront Tyler, but to take back everything he'd tried to steal from me. On the flight home, I watched the clouds drift by and replayed every conversation, every warning sign I'd ignored. Tyler's arrogance was almost breathtaking. He hadn't even bothered to hide the affair. It was as if he thought I was invisible, an obstacle, not a person. But instead of falling apart, I found myself making plans, building strategies. He'd underestimated me for the last time. The moment my plane touched down, I called Chloe, dragging my suitcase off the carousel, adrenaline making my voice crisp. I'm back. What's our next move? We've already notified the buyer, Chloe said, her tone brisk and reassuring. They're furious. Tyler never mentioned your name, never hinted that he wasn't the sole owner. He's about to learn just how messy this is going to get. As I listened to her, I felt the last of my fear slip away. For the first time I wasn't just reacting, I was in control. Tyler had tried to erase me, to erase everything we'd built together. But instead he'd triggered something in me I didn't know I had. The strength to fight for myself, to reclaim my future. This wasn't just about winning. It was about finding my voice and refusing to let anyone, especially Tyler, dictate the story of my life. And as I stepped out into the city, suitcase rolling behind me, I knew I was ready. Ready to face the wreckage, ready to build something new, ready to prove to myself that I was never as powerless as he wanted me to believe. They're finally on our side, which is a huge step forward for me. Feels like a victory after months of uncertainty. After talking it through with Chloe, I asked her to send the formal letter to Tyler. She didn't waste any time and fired it off to his email this morning. She told me the letter was explicit. It spelled out the illegality of his attempted sale, laid out in no uncertain terms that I'm the sole owner of the apartment, and detailed the consequences if he kept pushing this fraudulent scheme any further. No response from him yet, but honestly, I imagine he's at home seething, maybe pacing the living room and cursing under his breath. Part of me hopes he's finally realizing he's not as clever as he thinks. Let him stew in it for a while. He's never had to deal with real consequences before. When I walked through the front door that evening, everything felt off. The apartment was quiet in a way that made even the hum of the refrigerator sound louder than usual. Tyler's things cluttered the space. Jackets thrown carelessly over the back of chairs, shoes by the door. His backpack half-zipped and spilling out its contents. Everything looked the same as always, but it was as if the air itself had changed, heavy with the knowledge that the balance of power had shifted. I set my suitcase down and stood there, just taking it in. I knew a confrontation was inevitable. It felt like waiting for the first rumble before a thunderstorm. Sure enough, Tyler came barreling in later, face flushed with anger, phone clenched in his fist. He didn't even bother with a greeting. "What the hell is this?" he yelled, waving Chloe's letter like it was a personal attack. "You're saying I can't sell the apartment? It's half mine. You can't just cut me out. I met his glare, crossing my arms. No, Tyler. It's not yours. The deed has been in my name for months. You can't sell something you don't own, no matter how much you pretend otherwise. He stopped dead, clearly not expecting me to push back. His expression flickered between confusion and outrage, like he was struggling to process what I'd just told him. What are you talking about? That's not possible. I reached for the folder I'd set aside earlier, sliding the deed out and holding it up so he could see his own signature. After we refinanced, I had the deed transferred into my name. You signed off on it. Or did you just skim through the papers like always, too busy to actually read what you were agreeing to? He stared at the document, and for a second I almost felt sorry for him. But then his face twisted into a sneer. You think you're so clever, huh? It won't matter. Already made a deal. You'll look like a fool when it all falls apart. I didn't flinch. I just kept my voice steady and calm. The sale's already void, Tyler. The buyer knows you had no right to sell, and they're more than ready to drag this into court if you don't return the money. And let me be clear, if you've spent even a single cent of that deposit, you're looking at a much bigger problem than just embarrassment. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He glanced away, jaw working, suddenly unable to meet my eyes. You don't know what you're talking about, he muttered, but his voice had none of its usual force. Oh, but I do, I replied quietly. You've underestimated me for years, assumed I was clueless or too timid to stand up for myself. But I paid attention, Tyler. I know exactly what's been going on, and I'm done letting you walk all over me. You're going to face the consequences of your actions, whether you like it or not. He started pacing the room, hands running through his hair in frustration. This is insane. You're blowing everything out of proportion. You can't just kick me out of here like I'm some stranger. I raised an eyebrow, feeling a new kind of confidence settle over me. Actually, I can. The apartment is legally mine. I'm giving you some time to figure out your next move. But don't mistake that for weakness. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm not backing down. Over the next several days, the transformation in Tyler was almost startling. His righteous anger faded, replaced by a kind of frantic desperation. He called and texted constantly, his messages ping-ponging between begging for forgiveness and threatening vague consequences if I didn't back off. I stopped responding. Chloe, meanwhile, was relentless, tying up every loose end in the background. The buyer, furious at having their time and money wasted, pulled out of the deal entirely, and Chloe began drafting the divorce paperwork before Tyler had even caught his breath. You're in a really strong position, Mia, she told me one afternoon as we sat together reviewing documents. With the sale void, the fraud exposed, and the deed in your name, Tyler has no leverage left. If he wants to avoid criminal charges, he'll have to cooperate, and he knows it. Her words were both a balm and a painful reminder of everything I'd endured. For so long, I'd let Tyler take the reins, pretending it was easier to go along than to rock the boat. I'd convinced myself that keeping the peace was the same as being happy. Now, with everything out in the open, I saw just how much I'd sacrificed. My security, my voice, my sense of self. That realization hurt, but it also gave me a kind of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I was finally reclaiming my life. One night Laura, my best friend since college, came over to help me start packing up Tyler's things. We moved quietly at first, sorting through drawers and stuffing his clothes into boxes. It felt strangely cathartic, like every shirt and pair of shoes removed was another piece of his hold on me slipping away. How's he taking all this? Laura asked, holding up one of his ugliest ties with a look of mock horror. Honestly, not well, I said, letting out a laugh that surprised even me. He still thinks he can talk his way out of it, but I'm not budging this time. He doesn't get to manipulate the situation anymore. Laura grinned, tossing the tie into a box with a flourish. Good. He doesn't deserve a single inch of your space. Or your time, for that matter. I paused, feeling a wave of gratitude toward her. For so long I'd felt like I was carrying the burden alone, shouldering all the stress while Tyler coasted along, always expecting me to clean up his messes. Having Laura and Chloe in my corner made everything feel lighter, more manageable. I finally felt seen and supported, and it gave me the resolve to keep moving forward. The final straw came the day Tyler brought Nicole to the apartment. I was at the dining table, surrounded by paperwork, when the door swung open and they strolled in as if they belonged there. Nicole looked around, her eyes lingering on the furniture. Her lips curled in a satisfied, possessive smile as she clung to Tyler's arm. "So this is where we're staying?" she asked, her voice dripping with entitlement, already laying claim to a space that would never be hers. I stood up, heart pounding but determined not to let them intimidate me. "No, Nicole. This is where Tyler was staying. You, on the other hand, aren't welcome here at all." Her smile vanished instantly, replaced by a cold glare. She looked to Tyler for backup, but he seemed just as stunned as she was. "What is this supposed to be?" Tyler demanded, anger rising in his voice again, as if he still believed he had some say in the matter. "This," I said, spreading my arms to encompass the room, "is my home. It's not yours, it's not hers, and it's definitely not a crash pad for the two of you after what you've done. You both made your choices. You don't get to just waltz in and pretend nothing's changed." Nicole's face hardened, but she stayed silent, the weight of the truth finally settling in. Tyler, however, looked ready to explode, his whole world unraveling in front of him and powerless to stop it. In that moment, I realized how far I'd come. I wasn't the same woman who used to tiptoe around Tyler's moods, trying to keep the peace. I was done sacrificing myself for people who didn't deserve it. This was my home, my life, and for the first time in years I was taking back both, on my own terms. "You can't do this," Tyler shouted, voice hoarse and wild. "You're being unreasonable." I met his furious glare, my resolve unshaken. "No, Tyler. What's truly unreasonable is thinking you could sell my home out from under me, pocket the money, and expect me to just stand by and let it happen. You're lucky I haven't pressed charges yet." He planted himself in the doorway, blocking my exit like a petulant child, face flushed nearly purple with frustration. Nicole, arms crossed so tightly her knuckles whitened, edged closer to the wall, shrinking as if she wished she could vanish into the paint. "You're being ridiculous, Amelia," Tyler said, his voice cracking under the strain of desperation. "You can't just kick me out of my own home." I took a step forward, steady and calm, the kind of calm that comes after too many storms. "This is my home, Tyler. The deed has been in my name for months. You signed the transfer paperwork without bothering to read it, again. So no, it's not yours anymore." Nicole's head snapped toward him, her manicured fingers digging into her purse strap until the leather creaked. "Wait, what is she talking about?" Her voice, usually sugary, was sharp and brittle. "You told me this was your apartment. You said you'd already sold it." Tyler's bravado faltered. He flinched, waving his hand in a failed attempt at nonchalance. "It's complicated. I'll handle it." "Oh, it's not complicated," I shot back, closing the distance between us. "You tried to sell an apartment that doesn't belong to you. The sale is void, Tyler. Legally, you have nothing." Nicole's composure crumbled, her lips trembling. "You mean the money you told me you had?" She stopped herself, voice rising in disbelief. "Oh my God. Did you lie about that too?" "Nicole, let me explain," Tyler began, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender. But I cut him off, refusing to let him wriggle out of the truth. "No, I'll explain. Tyler tried to sell this apartment behind my back, thinking he could walk away with the money and leave me with nothing. What he didn't realize is that I already had the deed transferred months ago. So not only did he fail, but he committed fraud." Nicole's jaw dropped. She looked at Tyler, then at me, her eyes wide with betrayal. "Fraud," she whispered, taking a step back as though the word itself was toxic. "You're serious?" "Yes." "Fraud," I said, arms folded across my chest, the cold certainty in my voice silencing the room. And if he doesn't get his things and leave by the end of the day, I'll have no choice but to involve the police. The color finally drained from Tyler's face, his bravado collapsing under the weight of reality. You can't do this, Amelia, he pleaded, voice cracking. We've been together 6 years. You can't just throw me out. I felt a bitter ache, but I steeled myself. You threw me out the moment you made that call, Tyler. Remember? You laughed about me having to find a new place. You didn't just betray me, you tried to destroy me. So don't act like you're the victim now. Nicole turned away from him, shaking her head in disgust. This is insane, she muttered, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. You never told me any of this, Tyler. You said you had everything under control. He reached for her, desperation plain. Nicole, please, I just need. She cut him off sharply, hand raised in refusal. Don't. I'm not getting dragged into your mess. With that, she spun on her heel and stormed out, the door slamming behind her with a finality that echoed through the room. For a moment, I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile as the realization settled in. Looks like you're on your own, I said, turning back to Tyler. Now we need to discuss what happens next. He slumped onto the edge of the couch, shoulders hunched, face buried in his hands. Amelia, please. I know I screwed up. But you don't have to do this. You're right, I said quietly, picking up a folder from the kitchen counter and dropping it onto the coffee table in front of him. I don't have to, but I will. That's the divorce paperwork. My lawyer has already drawn it up, and I suggest you sign it. The sooner you do, the sooner we can both move on with our lives. He stared at the folder, hands trembling. You really hate me that much? I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping before I could stop it. No, Tyler. I don't hate you, not even now. Honestly, I pity you. You had someone who loved you. You had a home, a life we built together. And you lost it all because you couldn't see past your own ego and greed. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, but I stood my ground, refusing to let old fears creep in. You need to be out by the end of the day. Pack your things. Figure out where you're going next. This is the last time I'll offer you any measure of grace. He looked up at me, eyes red and hollow. For a moment, it seemed as though he might argue, might beg again, but instead his shoulders sagged in defeat. Fine, he mumbled. I'll go. Good, I replied, making my way to the door and holding it open. And don't even think about trying anything else. Chloe's already handling everything. You cross the line again, and the courts will take it from there. Tyler shuffled to the door, grabbed his coat, and left without another word, the weight of his actions finally settling on him. As the door closed behind him, I felt the strangest mix of emotions, a fleeting sadness for what could have been, quickly overtaken by a profound sense of relief. This was my home now. No one, not Tyler, not anyone else, would ever take it from me again. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was a silence I welcomed. For the first time in years I realized I could breathe, really breathe, without fear of betrayal or loss. The apartment felt different, somehow larger and warmer, now that it was truly mine. The echoes of old arguments and broken trust were gone, swept away with Tyler's final footsteps. As I locked the door with the new key, my key, I understood that this was more than just reclaiming an apartment. It was reclaiming myself. I wandered through each room, touching the walls, feeling their solidity, and let the relief wash over me. The uncertainty, the anxiety, the constant fear of what Tyler might do next, they were gone. Now there was only possibility. The future stretched out before me, open and unwritten. My heart, battered but still beating strong, felt lighter than it had in years. This was my space, my sanctuary, just me, just home. And for the first time in too long, I actually looked forward to what came next. I stood in the middle of the living room, letting the reality of it all settle deep into my bones. It wasn't just that I'd won an argument or ended a relationship. I'd managed to silence every voice in my head that ever told me I wasn't strong enough to stand up for myself. The room felt emptier than it had in years, but the emptiness was a relief, a space for possibility. Tyler's oversized gaming chair, once a monument to his presence, was gone, leaving an open corner that felt like reclaimed territory. The walls were finally free of those framed jerseys, each one a constant reminder of how much space he took up, even visually, in my life. The gaudy coffee table, the one he insisted was essential, had disappeared too, taking its ugly bulk and all the arguments about it with it. It was as if the apartment had been holding its breath and was now finally exhaling. The light came in differently, softer and more welcoming, and I could almost feel the place stretching out, making itself ready for me again. That night Lauren arrived, arms loaded with takeout and a bottle of wine she'd been saving for a special occasion. She dropped onto the couch with a tired but genuine smile, her presence steadying me after a week of chaos. "Is he really gone?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for any sign of doubt or regret. "Gone and not coming back," I replied, pouring the wine and handing her a glass. I felt the words settle in my chest, solid and unshakable. I gave him until the end of the day to pack. He didn't even try to fight me on it. The ease with which he'd left was almost as shocking as everything else. For so long I'd imagined a final battle, a drawn-out confrontation, but in the end it was quiet, almost anticlimactic. Lauren raised her glass with a conspiratorial grin. "To fresh starts and well-deserved victories," she declared. I clinked my glass against hers, the sound sharp and satisfying. "To never letting anyone walk all over me again," I added, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I meant it. The weight I'd been carrying all week started to lift, making space for something lighter. Hope, maybe, or just the simple relief of being done. In the days that followed, I reclaimed the apartment inch by inch. I moved the furniture, rearranging it until the flow of the space felt right for me, not dictated by someone else's preferences. I hung my own artwork in the living room, pieces I'd hidden away because Tyler thought they were too loud. I filled the shelves with books I loved, candles and scents that made me feel calm, plants that thrived in the sunlight now pouring through the windows. Each small change was an act of defiance, but also of healing. I realized I wasn't just redecorating, I was rebuilding a sense of self, one that had been eclipsed for far too long. Chloe, ever the steady friend and lawyer, kept me updated on the legal side. Her calm, assured tone grounded me through the uncertainty. "The fraud charges are off the table since the buyer isn't pressing them," she reported one afternoon. "And the divorce paperwork is progressing. Once Tyler signs, you're officially free." Free. The word hit me with a force I hadn't expected, echoing in my mind and reverberating through my body. It meant more than legal status. It was an end to years of biting my tongue, second-guessing myself, and shrinking to fit someone else's expectations. Tyler, predictably, didn't vanish without a trace. He reached out a few times, his texts a mix of guilt-tripping and half-hearted apologies. "I made a mistake. Can't we just talk?" he wrote once, as if a conversation could undo years of damage. Later he tried desperation. "You're going to ruin me, Amia. Is that really what you want?" But I didn't respond. For the first time in our entire history, I felt no urge to fix things, no compulsion to smooth things over or shoulder responsibility for his choices. I let the messages sit there, unread and unanswered, symbols of a chapter that was well and truly over. By the week's end, the apartment felt transformed. It was no longer a battleground or a compromise. It was a refuge, warm, inviting, and unmistakably mine. I sat on the couch one night, cradling a mug of tea, and watched the city lights flicker outside the window. Tyler's betrayal had blindsided me, but in a strange way, it had been a catalyst. It forced me to confront the truth of how small I'd allowed myself to become, how little I'd been willing to accept in the name of keeping the peace. Now I knew better. I wasn't just reclaiming my physical space. I was taking back my sense of worth, piecing together the parts of myself I'd sidelined for his sake. A month later, the change was even more pronounced. The apartment looked nothing like it had before, not because I'd done some massive renovation, but because the energy was different. Every detail reflected me. My taste in colors, my music drifting through the rooms, the quirky mementos I'd collected over the years. The space felt lighter, as if Tyler's shadow had finally dissipated, and with it, the heaviness I'd carried for so long. The divorce process went smoothly, thanks to Chloe's relentless attention to detail. She made sure Tyler couldn't stall or manipulate the situation, and in the end, he signed the papers with barely a word. There were no dramatic scenes, no emotional speeches, just a clean, clinical break. I expected to feel more sadness, but what I mostly felt was relief. The finality of it was liberating, a door closing on a part of my life that had held me back. One afternoon, while sorting through the remnants of our shared life, I came across a photograph of Tyler and me from the early days. We looked impossibly young, arms wrapped around each other, smiling like the future was something we could shape together. For a moment, I let myself remember the good times, the laughter, the hope, the belief that things would always be easy. But those moments had been eroded by years of neglect, chipped away until all that was left was a memory. I slipped the photo into an envelope and tucked it into a drawer. I wasn't ready to throw it away, but I didn't need it in plain sight anymore. It was a piece of the past, not a definition of who I was now. When the divorce was finalized, Lauren and I celebrated with dinner and cocktails on a rooftop overlooking the city. The air was balmy, the skyline glittered, and I felt lighter than I had in years. Lauren grinned at me, her eyes shining with pride. "You're glowing," she said, raising her glass. I laughed, feeling a genuine joy bubble up inside me. "It's not just being single," I told her. "It's the freedom. For the first time, I'm not living by anyone else's rules or expectations. I get to decide what my life looks like." We toasted to that, a promise to honor ourselves, to protect our boundaries, to celebrate the victories, big and small. As the evening wore on, I felt a stubborn pride take root in me. I'd been through something hard, something that would have broken me not so long ago, and I'd come out the other side stronger. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving, learning to trust myself, to value my happiness as much as anyone else's. Back in my apartment that night, I let the quiet settle around me. The city hummed outside, but inside, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The apartment was more than just a place to sleep. It was a symbol of everything I'd reclaimed. My independence, my confidence, my joy. I knew I wouldn't stay there forever. Someday I'd find a new place, one with no lingering shadows or memories to tiptoe around. But for now, this space was mine, a sanctuary and a testament to how far I'd come. And as I looked around, at the art on the walls, the books on the shelves, the golden pool of light spilling across the floor, I knew I was finally truly home. Until then, I stayed with Tyler, determined to savor every second in the home I had fought so fiercely to keep. Each day, I made a conscious effort to appreciate the small details that made the place mine. The sunlight streaming through the windows in the morning, the gentle hum of the city outside, the comforting clutter of my favorite books and keepsakes. That night, as I curled up on the couch, the same spot where I'd spent countless anxious evenings, a deep and genuine sense of peace finally settled over me, warmer and more lasting than anything I'd felt in years. My thoughts kept drifting back to Tyler, to the way he had laughed during that last phone call, convinced the battle was already over and the outcome set in stone. The memory made me smile, not out of bitterness, but with a quiet satisfaction. His arrogance had blinded him to the reality that I was stronger and more resilient than he'd ever imagined. In the end, it was my patience, my quiet determination, that had carried me through the storm, while his overconfidence had been his undoing. As I sat there, I realized this was about so much more than the end of a marriage. It was the close of one chapter, yes, but more importantly, it was the beginning of a new story, one that I would write on my own terms. For the first time in a long while, I felt empowered to decide what happiness meant to me. I could choose the people I wanted in my life, the dreams I wanted to chase, and the peace I wanted to cultivate. There was a profound sense of freedom in that, a liberation I hadn't known I was missing. I understood now that endings weren't just losses. They were also opportunities. The pain and struggles had been real, but they had shaped me into someone capable of standing alone, of embracing the unknown with open arms. As the night deepened and the city lights flickered outside my window, a quiet excitement grew within me. The world felt wide open, full of fresh possibilities. After everything, I finally felt free. Free to rediscover myself, to rebuild, and to create a life that was truly mine.